Welcome back to the home of the freestyled story. Last week I wasn't able to upload because unfortunately life happens. But this week we're back and decided to use the random generator again. So without further ado, let's see what it gives us. So the words are story, empty, pocket, children, and receipt. All right, well, let's dive in and see where this goes. Opium words. Okay, hurry now, kids. Let's get you into bed and get you all tucked in so we can start this bedtime story. Are you guys ready? Okay, let's get started. So, once upon a time, there was a young boy who lived a pretty fair life. He was still young, but he had time to enjoy himself, and he played around a lot and got into all types of mischievous things. And as he was playing, he came across this open field that had a weird well in it. When he went to the well, it was made of pure gold, and he couldn't see to the bottom at all. It was very deep. But he jumped on it and played around and tried to get some water from inside when he slipped and fell in. It seemed like he was falling forever. He doesn't know exactly how he landed, but next thing you know, when he opened his eyes, he was laying on a very similar field, at least it felt like initially, until he sat up and actually looked around. When he was looking around, he noticed that everything seemed to be much more cute. The trees looked like they were all types of lollipops, and the bushes looked like cotton candy. The road even looked like it might have been paved with Skittles, and everything just looked so sweet and tasty. After he gathered his bearings, he decided to try to find some people. So he got up and he walked around and noticed that, in fact, everything did taste like candy, because as he went along, he picked at things and bit at things, grabbing them and tasting their sweetness. It was like a child's dream come true, until he finally made it to this small village. And the houses reminded him of the gingerbread houses his family would make on Christmas. He thought this was all rather strange and this must have been a dream, but just like most dreams, he decided to keep going with it. So he wandered around through the village, knocking on doors and hoping for someone to come out. And after about the third door, someone finally came out, and it was another child. They looked to be the same age. He smiled and told the young boy that he was lost, and he didn't know where he was. He asked for some information, and the boy just told him that this was just their small village. They never really named it or anything. This is just his home that he's always known. He then offered to take him to their town center, where most of the other people who lived in the village would be, so of course he agreed. When they got there, looking around, the young boy noticed that everyone that was there was all around his age or younger. There were only a bunch of children, and he thought himself to feel rather old sometimes, seeing that he was now 15. But to see no other adults, that felt really weird. He went and sat in the back, and the young boy that he just met introduced him and told them that he seemed to be lost and that he was looking for help. All the children were staring at him oddly. It's like they never seen someone that wasn't from their town before. But he didn't really let it faze him. He just waited to see if someone would respond or try to help him out. And after a while, when they walked away and discussed things amongst themselves, one girl finally emerged from the crowd. The young girl was the only one who approached him, while the rest just sat back and stared. She smiled so big and so warm, and she grabbed his hand and clutched it. And as she clutched his hand, she leaned in real close and looked at his face. And she just kept examining him. And he started to blush a bit, feeling all antsy and not sure what was going on. So he kind of stepped back a little bit, but she followed shortly, getting closer and closer. And then he finally said, "Well, what are you doing?" She jumped back a little in surprise, and then was like, "Oh," and told him that she was sorry. But it was weird because he looked a few years older than everybody in their village, and she didn't really know what to make of it. The young boy told her that he was only 15, but he could tell that everyone else did look maybe a couple years younger, if not really younger. She said that a lot of the people there have lived for many, many years, some as old as 40, but they never aged past what they look like now. She said she was only 16 years old, but as he could look at her, she still looked younger than him. This was very strange. In this place filled with all types of sweet things, the people just didn't get old. But neither one of them decided to dwell on it. She offered to show him around and to give him just a rundown of the place, and of course, with nothing else to do, he agreed. The first place she decided to take him before giving him a full tour was their store of sorts. It was more of a market where most people went to barter or exchange things, but in this market, they had this very particular location that had pockets for sale. He thought it was quite peculiar because who would buy a pocket without the shirt attached? But then she explained to him that their pockets here have a very special effect. But he would have to purchase one, and she would be able to show him afterwards. He didn't have anything to purchase it with, so she told him the only way to do so is by having things to offer in exchange. So over the next few days, she showed him all around the village and got him well acquainted with everyone and everything that she could. And during that time, he was also able to collect items that he had to personally lug around just to barter for the pocket. Eventually, he collected enough and he was able to get the pocket, and she did him the favor of sewing it on for him. And once he had the pocket on, he was eager. He asked her, "What does it do?" And what he thought was weird is when he did get the pocket, most of the things that he collected to barter wasn't even used, but he knew for sure she told him that's what would be needed. So now he has so much left over that he would have to lug around. He didn't know how to feel about it. But now was the time to worry about the pocket instead, until he realized that she was picking up all his items and shoving them into the pocket that was now on his shirt. He was in awe. There was no way that anything should be able to fit in this pocket of these sizes. Some things were large and some things were small, some things were candies and others were items, but there was no way that he should be able to hold all of it in the pocket. He was amazed. And then she explained to him that the pocket's purpose is for storage. It actually has interdimensional capabilities that makes it basically a limitless bag as long as you can think of what you want and it's on your person. You'll be able to use it as you choose. The young boy decided to make good use of his new pocket, and since he hadn't figured out a way how to get home yet, he figured he would just live amongst them as best as he could. They were being extremely hospitable, as well as letting him have a place to stay and teaching him the ropes. These people, who were apparently of all ages but only looked like children, seemed to have a really well-functioning village here. But he felt that it was lacking something. It felt very sweet and pleasant, but yet it felt that it was lacking excitement or anything besides a very leveled version of pleasantness. So one day when he was out roaming by himself, he tried to go out as far as he could, but it only seemed to be circling back. There was never any ocean or sea. He never made it to any mountains, any roads, or anything else that would actually make this feel like it was more than just this small village inside of this world. He started to question it more and feel like there was much more missing than he initially thought. So when he was back in the village with the children, he started to probe at them and ask them more about the village and who they were. The answers all came back really vague, as if they were unsure themselves as to how they got there or anything that was strange, but this was all that they knew. So of course they didn't find anything strange. But instead of continuing to pester them, trying to get them to tell them things that they didn't know, he decided to tell them stories of his homeworld, and they were so very intrigued. They thought everything that he spoke about was so fascinating, from things like waterfalls and oceans where you can swim in, to mountains and trees that you can climb on, to hear about all the different varieties of excitement and happiness that were out there. They started to feel a bit empty. They felt as if maybe their village wasn't as ideal as they initially thought. That maybe something about this village was weird. But most of them decided to shake the thought off. They enjoyed his stories, but like most people, they came to realize that stories are mere fantasy, and that's all they took that as. They thought that all of his stories of the adventures and the fun that he's had to be either a figment of his imagination or something that was always going to be out of their reach. So while they enjoyed listening, they never took it to heart or let it weigh them down, even if they did have a bit of an empty feeling once the stories were over. But there was one person in particular that didn't want to think that her empty feeling couldn't be filled. She didn't want to think that what he said was just a lie. And this was the same girl who's been showing him around and being his now very best friend within the village. So the more that he stayed around and the more they went around the village together, the more he told her stories. The more stories that he told her on the one-on-one basis, the more she wanted to hear. She couldn't get enough. She was insatiable with wanting to hear all these stories. With each passing one, she would be drawn in more and more, and it helped her days pass. It was a weird feeling that she had, to think that maybe her life where she was at just wasn't enough, no matter how great it seemed before. But she knew at the same time, this guy here, but she also knew that this boy was not from here, so he would most likely be leaving soon, and that would be the end of that, because he has been looking for ways to get back to his home. So once he leaves, then there wasn't much she would be able to do about it. But that didn't stop her from wanting to partake in what he had to say. She continued to listen day in and day out as they continued to try to find a way for him to get back home, as well as collecting items and visiting the market and bartering. After so much time of him being there, even though they would still look for ways for him to go home, it felt like he was a part of the village now. While the time did pass fairly fast, it felt as if he had been here for about 6 months, seeing that the way that their days and nights worked was quite different than what he was accustomed to. There was mostly only days, and nights lasted but a few hours. But within this time, he seemed to have aged, even though it was barely noticeable. For a group of people who stayed looking like children and ceased to age after 13, his differences seemed very pronounced. They felt a slight twinge of discomfort watching him continue to get a little taller and get a little older as the days passed. Although they did not treat him different, he could tell that there were looks at him from time to time, but there was nothing he could do about it. It wasn't his fault that he was aging, and it wasn't his fault he couldn't find his way home. But he never let this get to him or get him down at all, because at the end of the day, he always was accompanied by the young lady who has never left his side for more than a day. So he felt very comfortable and felt like he possibly could stay here forever, even if he did age. However, everything changed when a sinkhole appeared shortly off from the village. It looked like it was gold-plated at the rim where the hole was created, and it looked to be rather deep, which gave him a weird sense of deja vu. He told the young girl about it and how he initially believed that the well is what brought him to their village. She smiled, figuring this was going to be her goodbye, and taking a leap of faith, she lunged at him, giving him a big kiss on the lips, and told him that she would hope to see him again one day, if it's ever possible. He was torn between leaving and staying, because while he did want to get back to his home and there were many things that he missed, he now met this wonderful girl that he couldn't really bear to leave. He told her of these feelings, saying that he wasn't sure if he should go or if he should stay because he wanted to be with her, but he missed so many things. And he then asked if she would come with him. She shook her head no. She said that she would love to. There were so many things that she would want to see that he told her about, but honestly, she was just too scared to leave right now. She wasn't sure what the new world would be like, and as he often mentioned when they roamed together, that he thought that this might have just been all a dream. She was scared that if she was to go with him down through this sinkhole and end up back in the other world and it was all just a dream for him, then where would that leave her? He, of course, denied this to the fullest of his extent, but she just got teary-eyed and told him sorry as she pushed him into the sinkhole. When he finally came to, he was laying in his bed at home. He woke up panicked, feeling the sense of falling still happening. He looked around and gathered himself, realizing that he was in his room. He hurried and ran downstairs. He seen his parents there. He asked them what the date was. They told him. And to his surprise, it hadn't even been one full day since he left, which he felt was extremely odd because he remembered so vividly being gone for a whole 6 months. He ran back up to his room. He looked around. He didn't know what he was looking for, but then he finally looked at himself in the mirror and realized he was still wearing the pocket that was sewed on. And when he reached into the pocket, it stopped. Much like a normal pocket from his world, his hand didn't seep down into it to this full interdimensional location where he stored things. Instead, it just stopped. But he felt something in it. He pulled out this paper, unfolding it. Looking at it in the front, he realized it was a receipt. Reading the front of the receipt, it showed that this was for the pocket that he had right now. But he felt that this was odd because he never actually received a receipt for the barter that he made, and the items that were listed weren't any of the items that he gave. The items that were listed were harder to acquire items that even after his 6 months of being there, he was unable to get. So he figured she must have been the one who got this for him using items that he didn't have as a gift. Then he hurried and flipped it over, and he read the back. There was a note from her that stated that she was very happy to meet him and she didn't mind giving up some of her items for him to get the pocket, because that's what this was for. It was for enjoyment, and there's only so many pockets she could have herself, and that if they were to ever meet again, she would go with him without a doubt, as long as he knew that it wasn't just a dream. Well, calm down, kids. Calm down with your questions. I know you're curious. What happened to him, right? Well, that has to be saved for another day, another bedtime story. But, Grandma, isn't that like the same note that's framed in the living room? And that's all we have for this week's story. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a sucker for a good romance. But, a lot of genres are close to my heart. What can I say? But I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope that means you'll be back next week when we have a brand new set of words, so we can have a brand new story that I don't even know what it's going to be. So until next week, hasta la bye-bye.